I'll just start the recording now. Okay, so we're exactly on time. Thank you all for joining our webinar today on Research Data Alliance for the Social Sciences and Humanities. It is a webinar that will bring forward insights from two of the Rda Europe domain ambassadors, Ricardo Brockman and René van Horik. My name is Timea Bairo, and I work for the Digital Repository of Ireland, which is the organization that is coordinating the Rda Europe Ambassadors program. So let's see if I can move the slides. Yes, before we start, just a couple of housekeeping points. So I've just clicked on start recording the webinar. So we are recording the webinar, and the recording will be made available online. Please use our Q&A button, or the Q&A button that is available at the bottom of your window to ask any questions that you might have. You are muted by default, but also we kindly ask you to feel free to use the raise button function if you would like to speak. Each of our speakers will take questions. We'll take questions at the end of their presentation. But in the meantime, if you feel you can obviously ask any questions throughout the meeting. Before we get started, we wanted to give you a little bit of a background regarding the Rda Europe Ambassadors program. So, and I'm gonna say a few words to try to frame this a little bit better, and then Ricardo and René will be sharing a little bit more of the information regarding their specific disciplines. So, the Rda Europe Ambassadors are a group of experts that have been brought together under the Rda Europe project umbrella. And their focus is to connect a little bit better RDA with specific domain-focused data communities. We have a set of resources that have been available, have been made available online. So I've added a screenshot to my slides. You can find them under the RDA for disciplines and Rda Europe Ambassadors section on the Rda website, and this highlights actually the goal of the Rda Europe program, which is that of providing an alternative way of navigating Rda and the Rda opportunities through a more specific discipline-oriented perspective. Now, currently we are actually counting 14 Rda Europe ambassadors. As you can see, these ambassadors represent and connect specific domain communities, but also broader topics such as the interdisciplinary research and the sustainable development goals, which are not specifically discipline-oriented, but they aim to provide a more tailored approach, and the work of the ambassadors is obviously focused on bringing forward alternative ways of understanding and working with data, and bringing on discipline-specific perspectives. So, without further ado, I'll pass on to. No, actually, we were planning on understanding a little bit better who's in the audience, and we have prepared a short poll, so hopefully this will be smooth, and I can open up the poll nicely. I might have to stop sharing the screen. Yes. So we will be launching a poll and should be able to see our small our few questions. So we would like to learn a little bit more about you. So what is your primary discipline? So what do you, if you belong to the social sciences and humanities, which is actually the focus of this session, or another discipline? We would also like to understand a little bit better what's your professional role, and you have multiple choices for both questions. And our final question would be would regard your involvement in the RDA. So if you have taken part in any activities that are related to RDA, if you wish to learn a little bit more, obviously, and if there might also be the option of not knowing much about it, which is good, because that means that this will be a good introductory webinar for you. So I'm going to leave that just a little while longer until I'll actually introduce our first speaker today, who is Ricardo Brockman. She is working for DANS in the Netherlands and is a program leader for the social sciences and humanities. She will be speaking to us a little bit more about the value of RDA for the social sciences and humanities, and this is based on her work of analyzing RDA groups and RDA outputs and all the various opportunities that the Research Data Alliance is offering. So let's see, we're close to 2 minutes that since we've opened the poll, and I'm gonna close it now, and just to see a little bit of the results, and I'm going to share those with you. Hopefully you can see the window. Ricardo and Rene, if you can confirm that. Oh, actually, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So we have 42% coming from the social sciences, 44% from the humanities. So there's a little bit of a bigger audience coming from the humanities, but just slightly bigger. And I see that also we have people coming from different disciplines, which is very good, because it will allow us to maybe establish more connection. And we do hope that this will be just the first webinar in a longer series of webinars coming from the ambassadors. So any feedback that you can share with us would be greatly appreciated. Regarding the professional role, I can see it's quite well balanced. So we have researchers, research support staff, and we have librarians and archivists and service providers in very close percentages. We don't have any policymakers, which was an option on the poll, but we do have other categories that have not been specifically listed. So thank you for that very much. This is very useful information for Ricardo and Rene, obviously, because they can tailor the answers to the audience that we have today. How familiar or / involved are you with the RDA? So only 3% don't know much about it. The majority, so 47 and 50%, have had some sort of engagement with the RDA, or know a little bit more about it and would like to learn more. So we appreciate very much the quick feedback on the poll, and it's very useful information. And I'm gonna pass on to Ricardo, who I think is able to share her screen now.
Yes, I hope you can see my screen now and you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So thank you, Timia, for actually inviting us for this webinar, and also for the nice introduction. So as you already mentioned, my name is Ricardo Brockman. I work for DANS, like my colleague René, and we are involved in the Rda Europe project and also in the Rda Ambassador program. And I will start with an overview of the work that I've been doing as an ambassador for the social sciences, and on providing guidance for people from the social sciences to find their way in the RDA. So as I mentioned, I am one of the Rda Europe Ambassadors, and what I've been trying to do is to help people get an idea of where they can go within the RDA to sort of find their way in the social sciences. So one of the things that have been established through this ambassador program are the discipline pages, and I think Timea mentioned them already as well. So there's, as you can see in the screenshot, we have a discipline page for an RDA in the social sciences, which gives a bit of a background on the different groups and activities that are there for the social sciences. And quite a lot of this information is based on an overview report that I have made. And the first version was published, I think, at the end of 2018, so already quite a while ago, in which we tried to guide mainly newcomers, but also actually anybody who is interested in finding their way, and trying to flag relevant work in the RDA for the social sciences. And that is also what I want to talk to you about today, mainly. And just to hear also, I'm really curious to hear what people think and whether this is useful. I have been working at DANS now for about 3 years, and my role at DANS is a program leader for the social sciences. And in that role, I'm involved in quite a lot of different projects in the social sciences on a national and also international level. For instance, within the Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives, CESDA, and also some of the EOSC projects, like the SHOCK project for the social science and humanities, and also the Rda project working on persistent identifiers, and also the RDA project that we're talking about today. Yes, and I would like to talk to you a little bit more about this report that we have been making. So the idea behind this report was really that the RDA is quite big. So at the time of this version of the report, which was October last year, there were about 56 interest groups and 32 working groups. And when you are new to the RDA, or even when you are not new, this is quite a lot of content to sort of dive into, and it can be a bit difficult, especially if you are not so familiar with the RDA, to find your way. And what I wanted to do with this report is to give a basic introduction and an overview of the groups, and flag some of the groups that might be interesting for people in the social sciences. So that was the background of the report. And it was meant as really sort of a guideline, not necessarily as an evaluation of what types of work these groups do, but really as a sort of starting point for people to find their way within the RDA, particularly for those interested in the social sciences. And as most of you probably know, the RDA is organized in interest groups and working groups, and interest groups focus on various topics and outcomes, but are active over longer periods of time and do not have specific goals or timelines, in contrast to the working groups, which also focus on different topics, but have concrete outputs and usually work around a fixed period of 12 to 18 months. And then the RDA also produces these outputs, which can be kind of different categories, but are usually officially from the RDA endorsed, and are recommendations that come out of the work that has been done in the different working groups. And this overview is available on Zenodo as well. This is the second version that we've published, which has the date of October 2019, and the first version was published a year earlier. So yeah, as I said, the RDA, when you first get into it, can be a bit overwhelming with all of the things that are going on. And what I did is I assessed the most relevant RDA groups for you, so for people interested in the social sciences. And I wanted to give you an idea of how we try to tackle this, and basically sort of bring a little bit of a categorization to the RDA groups. And what is interesting is that there was sort of work that was done in parallel within the RDA to actually also do some sort of categorization. And when this report was done for the very first time. That wasn't there, but now you have these focus and domain and fields of expertise selection criteria that I think are very, very useful. So I recommend everybody to have a look at this as well on the Rda website, which are shown here in green. So they structure the groups along their main focus on a couple of categories, and also the domain and fields of expertise. And social sciences is one of the domains that you can choose, which already makes it much more easier for people to find groups that are relevant for their discipline. But when I was doing my analysis, what I did is I started out with the interest groups and the working groups, and I sort of categorized them in this way that I will show you now. So my first step was to distinguish groups that are focused on general topics and groups that are focusing on specific topics. And within the general category, you can think of things like policies, data management, more technical aspects in terms of data, and anything else. So these were the categories that I applied to sort of structure the groups and provide this overview. And on the other side, you have these specific groups, which could be either specific for a particular domain, such as the social sciences, or specific for a particular type of data. For instance, I think there's an interest group or a working group on rice data, or data concerning rice, for instance. It could be specific to particular communities, for instance, librarians or other communities, or specific to particular organizations, for instance, to repositories. So this was the first sort of categorization that we did for this report to structure the analysis that we did for the social sciences. And based on this, I had a look at all of the different working groups and interest groups and all of the outcomes, and classified them as either being highly relevant for social sciences, moderately relevant, or not that much relevant. And I should say that this is really based on a brief study of the general descriptions of the group, and it's meant as a sort of guideline. So depending on your specific work that you do, some groups that I have not mentioned as being highly relevant might still be relevant for you. And this is really supposed to be a sort of initial analysis and should not be seen as an evaluation of whether groups indeed are relevant for your own work. But we thought it would be a really nice way of sort of giving a first idea of the groups to look at. And this is what I want to show you now, is the interest groups, working groups, and the outcomes that we thought were relevant for the social sciences in particular. So I'm going a little bit too fast. Let me try and go back. So in terms of relevant interest groups, I wanted to flag out 4 interest groups today, and you can find the overview with all the table of all the groups on Zenodo. So I think the interest groups that I would recommend to everybody who is joining the RDA and interested in the social sciences is the Social Sciences Research Data Interest Group, which I think was established last year. And it's an interest group to exchange on issues specifically from the social sciences and humanities. So this is a specific group focusing on exactly our domain, which I think is very nice and was very much needed as well. And I think it's a very, very nice group to follow and to get involved into if you're interested in this topic. Then the second group on the list is a group focusing on privacy implications of research data. So this is a group that deals with specific types of data, namely those data that are have privacy implications. And as social science researchers often work with personal data, this was deemed as a relevant group for social sciences as well. The third group, interest group, is a group on ethics and social aspects of data, which is a bit more general and deals with ethical and social issues regarding data archiving, sharing, and reuse. And I think this is generally an interesting group to follow, but also maybe some people might be looking at this from a social science perspective. And I think that was why we thought this was an interesting group to flag out here as well. And the last group on this list is the interest group on education and training on handling of research data, which is focused on data management. So it provides and exchanges information on how to manage research data, which I think, given the developments around open science and research data management being more and more important for actually all of our fields, is very, very important and interesting for social science researchers as well. And I should mention that some of the groups actually explicitly in their description mentioned that they want input from all the different disciplines. So this was also an aspect that we took into account in classifying these groups, if the groups were explicitly asking for sort of a domain, a broader domain involvement. So these are the interest groups that we identified, or at least sort of 4 of the 7. And in terms of working groups, as I said, these are a little bit of a little bit shorter duration, have concrete outcomes, and are often therefore a bit more specific. So we identified 2 that might be of interest to, or might be particularly interesting for social sciences. And one is exposing data management working groups, which is again a sort of general group focusing on data management. And it's taking a user perspective and addressing current problems concerning the lack of standards for DMPs. And I think they're also interested to hear from all kinds of different disciplines on how they deal with this, and the social sciences should be or can be involved and interested in this as well. And the other working group that we identified was the Publishing Data Workflows working group, which is concerned with data publishing and the analysis of existing and emerging workflows and standards. And also here, the social sciences might be an interesting discipline to get involved in this. And we also, at last, let me find my slide. Oh yeah, this is something I wanted to mention. Actually, in my report, I have not mentioned this group, working group yet, because it wasn't established by the time, but I wanted to flag this out, that in the recent COVID crisis, the RDA has been doing an amazing job in sort of bringing people together and working on COVID. And there's an interest or a working group on RDA COVID-19 for the social sciences. And I think this is a very interesting working group to flag out here as well. As I said, it's not included in the report, but I think it would be one of the things that I would recommend to people if you're new or if you're interested in the social sciences to look at what they're doing. They're working at an incredibly high pace, as far as I know, also the other COVID group that was established earlier. So it's really nice to see how the RDA functions in these sort of working group and interest groups. So that was on the working groups. We identified 2 RDA outputs and recommendations that we would flag out to social science researchers or scholars. The first one is the Metadata Standards Directory working group recommendation, which is an overview that gives access to a directory of metadata standards. And the social sciences, social and behavioral sciences, are one of the disciplines listed here. So this might be interesting if you're interested in the standards, metadata standards that are used or involved in this. That might be a very interesting recommendation for you to have a look at. And sorry about that, I'm going a bit too fast. The second output and recommendation is called 11 Quick Tips for Finding Research Data. And it's a data discovery recommendation that I think is interesting for several disciplines, including the social sciences. It corresponds to an article published in PLOS, and it has these 11 tips on how you can find research data that I think might be interesting for scholars in the social sciences as well. And this is what I wanted to talk about mainly. So just to summarize, what this report did is show that there are several interest groups and working groups and outcomes that are relevant to the social science scholars. And it was also meant as a first step to get involved. If you want to know more, you can have a look at the RDA disciplines page for the social sciences, and you can also find the full report that we've made on Zenodo, as I mentioned already. And now I'm very curious to hear questions and also discussions or comments, and yeah, curious to hear if people have thoughts on what has been presented. And I don't think I can see the Q&A, so Timea, if you have questions, then
you should be able to see the Q&A, but we currently do not have any particular questions. I remind you that that you can use the Q&A option, or you can also raise your hand if you wish to speak and ask any questions. I do have a question, maybe Ricardo. Oh, actually, we just received one from.
I can see it, I think.
Yes, you should be able to see it.
So it says, when you speak about social sciences, do you make a distinction between qualitative and quantitative methods, qualitative and quantitative data? That is a very interesting question. In principle, I don't. So for social sciences, I really would handle a broad definition, which on the one hand makes it really difficult to make recommendations, because in some sense, qualitative and quantitative data are really different. But in this analysis, it was really the general field, and I would not necessarily distinguish. I think this would be interesting to maybe look at more specifically if there are specific groups that are interesting for qualitative and or quantitative methods, but I didn't distinguish in that at this stage.
Thank you very much for that, Ricardo. We don't have additional questions, but I would though like to ask you. So, if anyone, well, everyone who reads the report and actually gets into understands a little bit better in terms of the what are the RDA opportunities related to the social sciences. What would be the next steps to take? So you've identified a few of the groups and a few of the outputs. For those in our audience who are at their first contact with the RDA, what should they do next if they find out something interesting for their work?
So that's a nice question. So I think really I think the RDA is very approachable in a way, and it's very easy to have a look at what people are doing. And I would always encourage people to just have a better look at the groups. And for instance, my first starting point would be the social sciences interest group. And also the next RDA is going to happen digitally, so it might be easier for people to attend. And I think that would be also a recommendation to go there and attend some of the sessions, because it's a pity that it's not happening live, but it's also an advantage because you can go to specific sessions that interest you. And I think that would be definitely something to do. In general, I think there's quite a big role for the social sciences to be more visible within RDA, but also in other sort of areas, and also to look for synergies with other types of data, other initiatives, because I think there's a lot of overlap between issues for the social sciences and also issues in other domains. So I think it would be really nice to see a bit more sort of cross-domain work, but it's a personal goal I would have. And I see we have another
question, yes.
question, which is, how do you consolidate the data collected for each group? What approach do you use to create insights for the data? I'm not sure I understand. So I think the question is how we sort of
my assumption is how you've actually collected the data for your report.
Yeah,
or at least the first bit of the question seems to indicate that.
I think that's what I think as well. So what I did is have a look at. So I basically first collected all of the information from the RDA website, and then I had a look at the description of the group, and tried to make a very brief summary of all of the different groups and what they're doing. And I believe that's also it's a column in the report. So there's a data set on all of the groups that you can download from the report, where you can have a bit of a better look of all of the groups. And based on that, I tried to make an educated guess, let's say, of which groups are interesting and which ones maybe less relevant. But we didn't do really an extensive analysis of everything that they're doing, because there's so much going on. What is interesting, though, is that there's this new classification in the RDA where the group chairs can actually themselves indicate whether they're relevant for the social sciences or for whatever domain. And I've checked, and it seems that most of the groups that we flagged in the report are also flagged by this sort of new classification system, so that this validates sort of the method,
the approach.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that gives that an answer.
To let us know, it's an anonymous question, so we can't unmute you if you want further details on this. But as Ricardo said, the data set behind the report is also available. So I'm sure she would appreciate feedback on her approach, and it is a reiterative exercise. So that would be very useful. We have another question from Olivier. But I would say that since it's focused on more on the humanities, we'll leave it to René. Gaia has come back with.
Pay attention to that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Gaia is also asking, how do the working groups organize their activities and coordinate? I think this is more of a broader question related to how RDA works. So maybe I can take this on and just say that the work of the groups, regardless if they're a working or an interest group, is outlined in what we call the charter in the case of the interest groups, or the case statement in the case of the working groups. And that's sort of their plan of work. Now, each group works in their own rhythm, based on obviously the time of their members and the timelines that they have outlined in their plans. So there's a lot of flexibility, and groups are autonomous in approaching any problem that they wish to address. But again, that's outlined in broader terms in their case statement and charters. So just to make sure we stick to the time, we'll pass on to René, our second speaker today. And if there will be additional questions, we can tackle them at the end, towards the end of the webinar. Okay, René, you're sharing your screen, which is very good. René has been involved for a very long time with many humanities initiatives. He is a project manager at DANS in the Netherlands. So he's Ricardo's colleague, and he is the Rda Europe Ambassador for the Humanities. So I'll let you take it away, René. Thank you.
Okay, so the slides are clear. You can hear me. So welcome to this session in the webinar. My name is René van Horik, working for DANS, just as Ricardo is doing. As part of the Rda Europe project, I am one of the, 15 or 18 ambassadors in the specific field. You see the web address on the top of this slide, where you can find information on the other ambassadors and disciplines that are covered by them. Just as Ricardo, I also made a report, the Research Data Alliance and Humanities. And what I basically will do in this talk is cover, in general terms, the content of this report. So, and that's available also on Zenodo. And Ricardo did a terrific job by doing a classification of the big number of working groups and interest groups. I found this very difficult because it always depends what you think is relevant, depending on the maturity of the research community and their role. But I also tried to do it, and I will explain more on it, but in broader terms, because I think it's you can debate on whether some working group of interest group is whether or not relevant. So how can the Research Data Alliance and the Humanities be of value to each other? So let's see, the Research Data Alliance basically is building an infrastructure for data sharing on a global scale. That's their basic sentence you see on the website. Humanities, I see, are academic disciplines that study aspects of, I have to put my camera away, of human society and culture. And it doesn't have a central discipline. And so there you can go, there is, for instance, a classification by the OECD, says humanities, that's history and archaeology, language and literature. I cannot see my complete slides. Wait a minute. Ethics and religion, arts, and obviously the category other, that's always there. So it depends on which classification you use. There are others as well. But concerning the methods, you could say that humanities primarily use critical or speculative methods with significant historical elements in its use. So using historical sources and use them to answer research questions. But there is, of course, a close relation between humanities and social sciences in fields such as law and politics. And I also expect that, as we asked you, to which group you consider yourself a member, that some people in the audience also use both classifications, and you see that social science and humanities is often mentioned in the same context. But okay, so we have two ambassadors, so we should, of course, try to make a distinction between our two fields. But this, I was hesitant to say, to put this picture on the slides. From humanities computing to digital humanities. I mean, initially, historians used computers to digitize material, like here, a device to digitize microfilm. And that is definitely not digital humanities. So it's a machine that converts historical material, but the methods still were basically in an analog, besides the fact, of course, that the digital format gives other opportunities for analysis, etc. But that emerged later. When I saw this picture, now I realized that I remember, of course, when we did this digitization project, that still a lot of the material that was digitized 25, 30 years ago is still available, because it is stored in a trusted repository, and it has good metadata, and it is accessible and usable. So even when the RDA was not there, we still take measurements to think about the long term. But of course, we made mistakes, and we had to convert things, etc. So this is humanities computing, and this is digital humanities. So digital humanities, an example, just an at random example. This is a screenshot of a tool where a digitized historical document you see in the middle has a transcription on the right with annotations, and on the left you see a structure of this source. So now you have you really use digital tools to do humanities research. This is an at random example, just to define the field, because So digital humanities that emerged about 15, 16 years ago. So first we saw this phase of digitizing material in ad hoc projects, storing it in repositories, and then we start asking ourselves, how do we document this? What kind of formats are there? How can we make it reusable? What about the licenses, etc.? So in the course of time, humanities research went to use computers for machine translation. You see the examples here: text analysis, markup, creation of concordances and glossaries, image processing, relate to the example in the last slide, analysis, geospatial analysis. There are more examples, just to illustrate the background. What we can conclude is that humanities data is rich and complex. It is often non-standardized in format. It is increasing because we have the RDA and other research infrastructures like Daria and Clarin, I'll talk about later. Initially, it didn't have a common or consistent metadata or ontology structure. This is also increasing, but still a long way to go. I mean, to formalize semantics is a challenge. And what about the copyright issues and the privacy issues? That is still also a work. But there is progress again, and the RDA is one of the players in this field, because there you can come together and start a working group or an interest group, or use the outcomes of these groups to improve the situation. So what I did is first, just as Ricardo did, also make an assessment of all the working groups and interest groups. I will come back to that later, but I took the starting point. I thought I should start from the researchers or the research communities that in the digital humanities, and see how they can benefit from RDA. So, because concerning data sharing in digital humanities, I could not find a single common practice across the entire domain. And the obstacles for data sharing have to do with governance, funding, and sustainability, and are not basically technical. I mean, it has to do with people's network, it has to do with funding and how to organize it. But in Europe, the S3 roadmap, the European Strategic Forum for Research Infrastructure, is an important factor in the improvement of the situations. And in the digital humanities, there are two prominent research infrastructures that definitely can be classified as active in digital humanities. Daria for the arts and humanities, and Clarin for language and linguistics. But there are more. There's also IRIS for heritage science, Ariadne for archaeology, Hyperion, restoration and conservation of cultural heritage. But what I did in my work is to concentrate on the Daria and Clarin, because they quite different. They are quite different in several ways. Well, now let's go back to the RDA. The RDA does not have a domain-specific working group, interest group active in the humanities. Well, there is a humanities and social science interest group, but after the review process, the reviewers of the RDA asked the initiators of this working group to focus on social sciences. So I thought, this is good. There will be an interest group on humanities and social sciences, but currently that's because it's human work. It's now more focused on social sciences. Concerning the assessment, so Ricardo has made a nice overview. She paid more attention to this aspect. I only would like to say that I think there are 6 interest groups and 2 working groups that seem to be relevant for digital humanities. And I refer again to the report if you would like to know which ones are relevant. And it will not surprise you. They are related to research data management and data repositories. Then there are, these working groups of course, they also create some output, and that is, of course, also relevant. And the outputs, the topics with data citation, certification, position identifiers, metadata management, interoperability, and identity management, I consider as relevant for digital humanities. And it has, of course, quite an overlap with the classification of Ricardo. But I think these are all discipline agnostic. So because other disciplines also need this, for other disciplines, these recommendations are also relevant. Okay, so we see there is an interest for digital humanities in RDA, and RDA has something to offer for digital humanities. That's what the ambassador said. So what I did is, well, go back to the Rda research infrastructure again. Currently, not many people active, well, I have to say last year, maybe it improved already, not many people in the Rda community are active in RDA. So what to do is go to, I went to the Rda annual event and presented this poster, and you see here a fragment of this poster. So I try to convince people at the event that it is important to take notice of the Research Data Alliance, because you can contribute to the infrastructure development, you can share experience, gain experience, and also the RDA can give you recommendations on data sharing, the ones I mentioned in the other slides. Also important, funding. The RDA also has funding opportunities. Depending on the program, or sometimes for an adoption story. So you say, I want to adopt a standard or a guideline, and RDA can have funds for that. You should take a look at the website. I'm not familiar, I do not know the current situation. And of course, the working groups and interest groups and the plenaries mentioned by the plenary meetings mentioned by Ricardo are also very relevant to go, because that's a network event where you meet other people and you can engage with them and share experiences. And I think, well, it will not surprise you, 3 examples of RDA output are specifically relevant for the digital humanities, for Rda research infrastructure. The one concerning research data management, metadata standards and certification of repositories. And so if you are also, you have your background in digital humanities and things, what should I do to get to see what RDA can do for me? I would like to recommend to take a look at these 3 output examples of RDA as a first step. The other example is the Clarin research infrastructure. But the Clarin research infrastructure is really, really very well represented in RDA. You could say that Clarin is active in the working groups and interest groups, and also applies the outcomes in their infrastructure. And it is interesting. I have here a screenshot from Dieter van Uitvank, who is the technical director of Clarin. And he is explaining how Clarin is adopting RDA outputs. And it's very nice to see that he says that he also connects with neighboring communities such as Rda and Europeana. So here, this is an example how already the engagement is progressing. So, 2 examples. Rda is less involved yet. Clarin heavily involved. But for instance, in Rda, there is now also a working group on research data management, and I take notice of that and try to participate in this working group and bring the RDA work under the attention of the members of this working group. So the situation is improving at the moment. to wrap up, I think that quite some RDA activities are relevant for digital humanities and services to support digital humanities research. I repeat myself here, it has to do with metadata management, interoperability, persistent identifiers, certification, identity management. And it can also be observed that humanities research infrastructures are increasingly getting involved in RDA activities. And that is a good situation, I think. So yes, that is basically what I wanted to say. Again, this is, I think most of it is also written down in the report. That is, that I showed in the second slide on the Zenodo. And RDA Europe will still have some months to go. So I hope that I can also in the near future contribute to the engagement between digital humanities and RDA. But I do not overestimate my role. I mean, it's a huge community. RDA is more than 10,000 people and growing. So yeah, but I'm looking forward to contribute to increase the situation. And that is what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for that.
So now I'm sharing. Yeah.
Do you hear? Yes, please. That would be okay. I'll try to share my video as well, so then you don't see only the black background. So we do have Olivier. Please let us know if actually René's presentation has answered your question. So you were wondering how is structured RDA with European programs such as Daria for the humanities and Ariadne for the archaeologists, which deal exactly with the same issues. So René has highlighted especially the collaboration with Daria and Clarin, but he has mentioned other research infrastructures and initiatives. And I can also tell you that there are, at individual membership level, there are many people who work on both initiatives and establish these sort of connections. So that's we're very happy about that. Let us know though if that answers your question. Maya also is asking if you've mentioned some of the groups working and interest groups under RDA, and there's a specific one on empirical humanities metadata, the empirical humanities metadata working group, and she's asking about that. Why haven't you specifically addressed that working group? To the best of my knowledge, that is still a group that needs to deliver on the plans or on the outputs, and it might not be that active. But I'll let you tackle that question.
Well, this is also an indication that the situation is improving. I wrote this report last year, and I think at that time this working group was not initiated, but I'm not sure. And yeah, well, I do not know the goal of this working group. I mean, will they solve the metadata problem of digital humanities? I don't think so, but maybe for a part of it. I mean, yeah, that's good. So yeah, it's a pity that that people cannot react, talk. Yeah.
Maya, again, so she can, if you would like to add additional details to your question, please feel free to do so. Just raise your hand and we can unmute you.
But
we have another question. Go.
I could also ask to Maya if, in case she is involved in this working group and she thinks that I can do something in this working group. Mm-hmm. Make it, I don't know, to spread the news on it or whatever. But again, do not overestimate my influence. Then please contact me, and I'm happy to collaborate on it. Yeah, and the next is okay. So let's.
Yes, we have another question. I'm not sure. Do you want to read it yourself, or would you like me? It comes from Ryan O'Connor.
Yeah.
He's thanking you for the presentation. He has actually 2 questions. So
Yeah, this first question is again non-technical.
So what do you think the RDA and similar communities could do better to develop open research practices in disciplines that do not traditionally have as much of a focus on active research data management and data sharing and reuse? So this is I think one of the key questions. And well, when we talk about the differences between disciplinary approaches, obviously the humanities are so much focused on the researcher, because it's about the humanities method. So it is
again to do with that carrot and the stick. You could say we cut funding if you don't share. Or you could say we create a trusted environment, so trust us, and so that you are that you are sure your work will be acknowledged. I recognize this situation very much, and yeah, it does. It's not one fits all. I mean, it's you need a tailor-made solution for it, and. But yeah, it is increasingly going better, I think. The support for open science is growing, but there are also good arguments not to do it and to close it or to keep it closed. And yeah, what can the RDA do? What can the RDA do? I don't.
Well, it is providing solutions that support the work, or as you pointed out, different aspects and areas of the work that are necessary, and it does provide the community and the forum to discuss all these issues. But obviously, there is more to be done, and I think that's where Ryan's question comes from. He does have, thank you for that, Brian. He does have, you have a second question as well. So within the humanities, René, obviously it's addressed to you. Do you think it is necessary for the methodologies used by individual disciplines to become more quantitative in focus for these disciplines to benefit more from the open research practices developed by communities such as the RDA? Okay. So,
I'm not sure if I understand this question. To become more quantitative with respect to quality.
Well, I think it's also related to his previous question. So the fact that a lot of the more open research and open science practices are more, let's say, they apply a little bit better to quantitative methodologies. So. Yeah. I think his question stems from there. Ryan, if you would like to, we are happy to unmute you if you'd like to.
And quantitative data, or is it, or do I misunderstand the question? That's not the case, isn't it? Or is this more quantitative in focus? Yeah.
Let's see if Ryan would like to add more information on that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. Thanks, and the answer of the first question. I was just wondering about the, I guess it was more when we're kind of talk about digital humanities. Is it the case that these disciplines would have to become more digital, in essence, in their methodologies and in the data, for them to benefit from open research practices? It's kind of just that the other. It's basically, I think it's the second question is basically the other side of the coin from the first question, I think.
Yeah, I find this difficult to answer. I mean, in the end, the RDA is supportive, is enabling better research. But in the end, of course, I think the disciplines themselves or the researchers themselves have also responsibility and some independence in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I may add to that, I think that there's also a value to RDA in pointing out the specificities of such disciplines like the humanities and the social sciences as well. So we do speak about open science across the board, and as Brian says, different practices, but it is one of the areas where RDA can provide and does provide additional value in highlighting what is specific for disciplines that are smaller and sometimes maybe don't have such a loud voice like the humanities and the social sciences. I don't know, Ricardo, would you like to add anything to that? I think you're muted.
I don't know. I think it's a bit difficult, and I think actually there has already been quite a lot of development also in the humanities and in the social sciences to digitize more and make more use of the technologies. But yeah, I think it also depends on the subdisciplines, right? I mean, that's what René also mentioned. It's such a broad field that I think it's very hard to give sort of standardized answers on this, I think.
Yeah. But it is obviously one of the issues that need to be tackled. So maybe a working interest group on that, or a specific aspect of the problem, because it's so broad, might be useful. We have another question from Gaia, and we will stop because we're just a little bit over time. So Gaia is asking, do you specifically tackle solutions also for researchers working with qualitative methods and gathering qualitative data? She would specifically be interested in metadata and documentation solution for this type of data, and how to be able to share this type of data. She knows that it's a huge issue, and would like to know if there's any working group addressing this specifically.
I think there's not a working group specifically addressing this issue, but components related to it. I mean, qualitative data, if it contains personal data, you come into the field of anonymizing data or privacy protection. I think there's work done in RDA in that field. You could also think about, of course, identity management in a sense. If you have data set that you only would like to give access to the persons you can control, and then you are in identity management. Yeah, metadata. I have some experience with oral history, but this is a very specific field, and so.
I think there is
different approaches. Yeah.
I was thinking of the metadata standards catalog. So there is a group under RDA who actually addresses metadata standards based on various disciplines. So they have a catalog that is continuously being updated, and it provides a breakdown of the different standards by discipline, by type of discipline. So that might be a useful place to start, Gaia.
And I'm also thinking if it's about data collection, maybe the data management plan work of the RDA might also be interesting, because in terms of collecting sensitive data and sharing it, you will need to think about that sort of in advance. So this work might also be helpful.
Yes. There are several groups addressing different aspects of the data management planning. So since it regards planning, and it provides it provides also guidelines on how to tackle these issues. So do follow up with us, Gaia. Okay. She seems to be satisfied with the answer. So thank you very much all for joining us. We're sorry we're just a little bit over time, but we hope this has been a useful exercise to all, and we'll make the recording available and also the presentations. So thank you for all your questions, and thank you to our speakers for their insights, and we hope to see you soon at the next webinar. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.